June 28, 1944. Normandy, France. 02:11 in the morning. 8 hours ago, the 3rd Battalion rolled into attack with 32 Sherman tanks. By midnight, 19 of them were no longer moving, 3 burned out on a ridge, 6 sat with twisted tracks in the hedgerows. The rest simply died where they stood. Engines seized, gearboxes shattered, fuel lines ripped open by shrapnel. If at least 10 of those tanks are not back in the line by sunrise, the German counterattack planned for dawn will hit a battalion that is half blind and half naked. That math does not appear on any big map in a quiet chateau. It lives in the head of a 24-year-old mechanic from Detroit named Jack Miller, hunched over a steering wheel on a flooded French road. The blackout curtain in front of his windshield leaves him a slit of darkness to look through. On paper, he belongs to a maintenance platoon. In reality, for the next few hours, the survival of an entire armored battalion hangs on what he and 11 other men can do in the mud. The recovery truck under him is overloaded and wrong for this road. On its flatbed lies a complete powertrain for a Sherman tank. 2 tons of steel chained down in a way that would make an American safety inspector faint. The transmission case flexes the wooden bed with every bump. A crate of track links is wedged against it and rattles like chains in a ship's hold. Fuel cans and oil drums, tied in place with whatever rope the platoon could find, sway with each lurch. Jack used to stand on polished concrete, installing gearboxes into cars that would never see anything more dangerous than a winter in Michigan. He knew exactly how loud a healthy engine should be at any given speed. He could tell a bad bearing by the vibration in his boots through the factory floor. Out here, the sounds are wrong. The road itself growls. One side of the truck keeps sliding toward the ditch every time a wheel finds a hidden rut under the water. Somewhere ahead, beyond the reach of his lights, French trees grow in thick walls of hedgerow that can hide a German anti-tank gun less than 100 yards away. His assistant, 20-year-old Eddie Harper from Iowa, leans forward in the passenger seat, one hand braced against the dash. Eddie's world before the war was measured in acres and harvests, not production quotas. His father owned 2 tractors, one of them older than he was. When something broke in the middle of harvest season, there was no spare machine, no dealer, no waiting for parts. You made the broken thing work with what you had. You pulled pistons out on a dirt floor and turned bent shafts straight against a stump with a hammer. Eddie learned that a tool that is not in the book is sometimes the only tool that matters. Now the book says a seized tank engine in the field is a depot job. The front says it is Jack and Eddie's problem in the next 3 hours. They roll up on a checkpoint that is nothing more than a sandbag wall and a tired military policeman with dark circles under his eyes. His white gloves, once clean and crisp, are stained with mud and oil from directing endless lines of vehicles. He waves a tank destroyer through, then steps into the truck's path and slaps the fender. "You the fix-it boys from maintenance?" he asks, voice rough from shouting over engines. Jack nods. The MP jerks his thumb toward the dark ahead. "Battalion commander has been screaming on the radio for you for the last hour. He lost 8 runners on that push. Says if he has fewer than 20 tanks able to move at first light, he is pulling his infantry back and giving the Germans the road." His exact words were, "If the mechanics cannot get them moving, they can carry rifles in the next attack." The words land like a physical weight in the cab. It is not an idle threat. 2 weeks ago, after a particularly bad night, another maintenance section had 3 men temporarily reassigned to a rifle company because they could not get a key bridge cleared of wrecks in time. Jack remembers seeing them afterwards, walking past with carbines instead of wrenches, faces blank. Eddie mutters under his breath, "If we screw this up, we do not just lose tanks. We take their place in the foxholes." The MP steps back, slaps the side of the truck again, and the vehicle growls forward. The road narrows, hedges close in. Twice the truck's right wheels slide so deep into the ditch that Jack feels his stomach drop. If they roll this truck here, if they break the powertrain on its back, the mission ends. 19 dead tanks stay dead. Jack eases the steering wheel in fractions of an inch, feeling every tilt through his fingers. They round a corner and almost hit it. The first tank looms out of the darkness without warning. A 30-ton shape sideways across the lane, its nose buried in the opposite bank. One track hangs loose, broken open like a busted chain. The other is still tight, bitten deep into the mud. The tank has tried to climb out of the lane, failed, and slid halfway into the ditch. Its rear hangs over the road just high enough that the truck can squeeze past, but only if Jack threads it with inches to spare. He stomps the brake. The recovery truck shudders to a stop less than a yard from the tank's rear hull. For a second, in the quiet that follows, there is only the ticking of hot metal and the sound of distant artillery. "What idiot parked it like that?" Eddie says quietly. A voice answers from the darkness. "The idiot is right here, kid." 4 men sit in a shallow scrape on the side of the lane, helmets off, shirts unbuttoned at the throat. Their tank commander, a sergeant with oil streaks on his arms and a jagged tear in one sleeve, stands up and walks over. "We tried to pull her back with another tank," he says. Cable snapped. Our driver rode the brake too hard. Final drive started smoking. And then Jerry started walking shells closer. We bailed before he found the range. He says it flatly, without drama, but Jack's eye goes immediately to the stripped, shiny teeth on the drive sprocket, and the track links twisted at an angle they were never meant to see. This is not a simple thrown track. The chain has come apart under load. The drive teeth are chewed and polished. Somewhere inside the side hull a gear is probably cracked. On a proper workshop floor, with a gantry crane and full tool racks, this would be a long morning's job. Out here, kneeling in soft mud with no crane and 2 tired jacks, it is going to be a fight. Another shape sits further down the road, just visible as a lump against the hedge. That will be the second patient. Jack knows from the report that a third tank is somewhere in a field to the right, hull down in a shell crater with a dead engine. He calls his men forward with a sharp whistle. They climb down from the truck, one by one, and fan out around the stalled tank. They do not look like front-page heroes. One is in his late 30s, gut pressing against his belt from too many years on a factory floor before the draft board called his name. Another has the thin shoulders and nervous eyes of a kid who was still in high school when he was handed a wrench and a uniform. Their uniforms are stained in patterns infantrymen rarely see. Oil up to the elbows, tiny burns on the backs of the hands from welding spatter, black half-moons under the fingernails that never completely wash out. Jack does not give a speech. He points. "Eddie, you have this one. Track and drive. I want it able to move under its own power in 3 hours. You get Davis, Fox, and Powell. Harris, you are with me on the second tank. We are ripping its guts out and putting in the spare. The third one we look at last. If the engine is locked solid and the hull is sitting too deep, we mark it for daylight salvage." Eddie nods once. 3 hours to straighten a twisted track, replace or flip a drive sprocket, retension everything, and make it trustworthy enough to haul itself and 4 men back into a fight. On the training ground, that number would be laughed at. Out here, with the battalion bleeding, it is simply what has to happen. He starts by digging. The mud against the damaged sprocket is like wet concrete, packed in by the weight of the tank's desperate last attempts to move. Shovels bite into it in ragged rhythm. Breath clouds hang in the cold air. When the metal finally shows, the damage is worse than he wanted to see. Several sprocket teeth have sheared off entirely. The rest are worn and rounded from spinning under load with the track half off. "We can flip it," he says, panting. "Take it off, turn it around, get a less chewed side on the working face. It will not be pretty, but it might last a day. That means lifting the side of the tank." They drag the jacks out from the truck, heavy cylinders of steel with handles that swing up and down like pump levers. In the depot, they are used well within their rated limit. Here, everyone knows they're about to ask more from them than the engineers who designed them would have ever approved. They find the strongest-looking part of the hull edge, wedge scraps of wood and broken planks from the roadside under it, and position the jacks. The first 10 strokes go easily, pistons rising, hull lifting. The 11th stroke makes a new sound, a wet groan, as one of the buried planks shifts in the mud. "Stop!" Eddie barks. Too late. The plank shoots sideways, the jack tilts, 30 tons of tank slides an inch, and then drops the same distance. The ground jumps, the jack's handle whips upward, catching one of the men on the forearm with a sharp crack. He yells and goes to his knees, clutching his arm. For a fraction of a second, everyone just breathes. If the jack had kicked out completely, if the hull had fallen a full foot, there would be a broken leg or a crushed hand under it now. They all know it. The man with the hit arm flexes his fingers experimentally. "Nothing broken," he grits out, "just bruised. This is the part of the job no manual talks about. No diagram shows a plank sliding in mud or a jack biting through rotten wood. The official instructions assume concrete. These men have learned to improvise or watch each other get hurt. They double up the support, shoving stones and thicker boards under the hull, wedging them in with sledgehammer blows until the structure feels solid. No one says it, but their eyes meet briefly. Second chance, do not waste it. Further down the road, Jack's group works on the second tank. When they crack the inspection plate, the smell of burned oil is so strong it makes the youngest man cough. The engine inside has gone beyond field repair. A bearing must have seized, welding itself to the crankshaft under full load. Somewhere during the last attack, in the worst possible moment, the driver saw his oil pressure gauge drop and then heard an explosion of grinding metal. The tank stopped in place, like someone had slammed a wall in front of it. According to doctrine, this vehicle should be towed to a rear echelon workshop. That would take a day, maybe 2. The battalion does not have that time. "We are not fixing this one," Jack says. "We are transplanting it." They unchain the spare assembly from the truck. 2,000 pounds of steel hanging over soft mud and men's feet. There is no crane. They build one. Steel beams from a wrecked trailer, tow cables from the tank itself, chains looped through lifting eyes. It looks exactly like what it is. Something designed in 5 minutes by men who know what will happen if it fails, and are going to do it anyway. The first inch of lift is the worst. The cables sing. One of them snaps tight so suddenly that everyone flinches. The improvised boom bends, then stops, frozen in a new arc that it was never meant to have. Every man under it knows that if any part lets go now, the falling steel will not just dent a fender. It will crush skulls and ribs. "Keep going," Jack says quietly. They pump the jacks. The ruined unit rises out of the hull like a tooth from a jaw. Mud and old oil drip from it in black strings. They swing it aside inch by inch, muscles burning, and lower it onto the ground. Then they haul the spare unit into place, reversing every move with the same slow precision, any slip a potential accident. Time does not move in minutes here. It moves in completed steps. Track off, sprocket unbolted, jack repositioned, unit clear, unit in. Every time someone glances east, the sky is a little less black. At some point during the night, a shell lands closer. Not close enough to hit the road, but close enough that dirt and small stones patter down on steel. Everyone freezes instinctively. One man ducks under the tank as if the thin sheet of armor makes any difference to a high-explosive shell. A second round does not follow. The distant gun has other targets. The tank crews watch all this with a particular kind of tension. These are their homes and their shields. They know the serial numbers on the hull plates. They carved their girlfriends' names into the inside of the turret. When Eddie's team finally slams the last track pin back into place and waves the driver up, 4 men climb aboard like they are reuniting with a wounded friend. "Engine on," Eddie says. The starter grinds, whines, catches. A cough of smoke, a stumble, then the deep, even roar of a radial engine that has not yet had time to fail these men. The tank creeps forward a yard. The repaired track stays tight. The sprocket teeth bite instead of slipping. Eddie watches every rotation like a doctor watching the heartbeat on a monitor. 1, 2, 3 full turns. "Good enough to fight," he says. By the time the horizon starts to pale, the second tank has its new heart bolted in and humming. The third, the one nose down in a crater off the side of the lane, has resisted everything the platoon could do in the dark. Its hull is stuck too deep. Its engine is cold and dead. They have patched hoses and capped leaks. But without a big winch and daylight, they cannot drag it out without risking another wreck. Jack makes the call he hates. "Mark it," he says. "Daylight team will come back with the wrecker. We have already bought the battalion a lot more steel than they expected. The number is ugly and beautiful at the same time. 2 tanks fully operational, 1 damaged but ready to tow, 3 vehicles saved out of 3 they touched tonight. If those 3 had stayed where they were, the battalion would be going into dawn with 13 runners. Now it will have at least 16. 3 extra guns. 15 extra men under armor instead of in open foxholes. As they pack their tools, the 1st Infantry platoon for the morning attack trudges past on the same lane, boots squelching in the mud. One young private glances at the oil-stained men by the truck and at the tanks idling behind them. "You the guys that brought those back?" he asks. Jack just nods. The private looks at the tanks one more time, then back at the mechanic. "Then I guess I will walk a little straighter," he says. "Those things in front of us might be the only reason I come back down this road." He moves on. The comment will not be written in any report. The battalion log for the night will record that 3 vehicles were returned to service. No names, no mention of a near-crushed arm, of cables that almost gave way, of a plank that almost turned a routine lift into a funeral. The men of the repair platoon climb back onto their truck. Their hands shake from fatigue and adrenaline. The powertrain crate on the bed is empty now. In its place, on the road ahead, engines thunder as tanks form up for another push into hedgerow country. No one will ever give a medal for changing a transmission under fire, but if those tanks reach the next village with their armor intact and their guns loaded, it will be because 12 mechanics treated the night like a factory shift in hell and refused to let dead steel stay dead. July 12th, 1944, Normandy, France, 04:33 in the morning. Jack Miller has not slept in 41 hours. His platoon has repaired 18 tanks in 2 days. 3 men collapsed from exhaustion yesterday and were carried to the aid station. 1 is still there with heat stroke. The battalion has 11 operational Shermans left out of 51 it started the week with. 11 tanks to hold a 2-mile front against a German counterattack that intelligence says is coming at dawn. The math is simple and fatal. If the Germans hit with 2 panzer companies, which they have in reserve, 11 American tanks will not stop them. The infantry will be overrun. The front will collapse. Men will die because there is not enough steel between them and the enemy. Jack stands in the battalion command post, staring at a map under a flickering Coleman lantern. The major in charge looks like he aged 10 years in the last week. Coffee stains run down his shirt. His hands shake slightly when he points to a pencil mark on the map. "That is a fully functional Sherman," he says. "Crew bailed 12 hours ago when a hit jammed the turret and started an electrical fire. They got out. The tank did not. It is sitting 700 yards forward of our lines, directly between us and the German positions. Engine works. Ammo intact. Gun undamaged, except for the turret traverse. Jack knows what is coming before the major says it. If we leave it there, the Germans will tow it back tonight and have it shooting at us by tomorrow afternoon. If we shell it, we lose a tank we desperately need." The major pauses, and his voice drops. "I need you to take a team forward, repair the traverse, and drive it back before the Germans realize what we are doing." The words hang in the air like smoke. Jack does the math automatically. 700 yards into no man's land, 50 yards a minute crawling on your stomach, 15 minutes to reach it, 30 minutes to assess and repair in complete silence, 15 minutes to withdraw. An hour exposed between two armies that will shoot anything that moves. He looks at Eddie Harper, leaning against the tent pole with a bandage wrapped around his left hand. A wrench slipped 2 nights ago during a track repair and tore the skin open to the bone. Eddie has not complained once. His face is gray from exhaustion and blood loss. But when Jack meets his eyes, Eddie just nods once. "How many men?" Jack asks. "5 total. You pick them. And if we do not come back," the major does not flinch. "Then I write 5 letters tonight instead of 50 tomorrow." Jack steps outside the tent. The night air is cold and damp. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbles like thunder that never stops. He gathers his team: Eddie, Davis, the electrical specialist, Kowalski, thin enough to squeeze into tight spaces, and one rifleman from the infantry, a private named Carson, who volunteers before Jack even finishes explaining the mission. They strip down to the essentials: no helmets, they make noise; soft caps, no canteens, they rattle; no extra ammunition, too much weight. They empty their pockets completely and leave everything on a table in the supply tent. Wallets, watches, letters from home. If they do not come back, someone will box it up and mail it with the official telegram. Eddie pulls a single photograph from his shirt pocket. His younger sister, standing in front of their farmhouse in Iowa. He looks at it for a long moment, then tucks it back inside. "If I do not make it," he says quietly, "make sure she gets that." Jack does not answer. There is nothing useful to say. Instead, he picks up a canvas bag with a 40-pound Traverse motor inside and slings it over his shoulder. The weight pulls at muscles that have not rested in 2 days. His hands shake. He clenches them into fists until they stop. At exactly 05 FAO, American artillery fires smoke rounds into the tree line. White phosphorus boils up in thick clouds that spread across the field like fog. Visibility drops to 50 yards in some places, less in others. The smoke will last maybe 20 minutes before the wind tears it apart. That is the window. After that, anyone in the open will be fully visible to both sides. The 5 men crawl forward on their bellies. The ground is torn up from weeks of shelling, pocked with craters, slick with mud. Jack drags the tool bag behind him with one hand, pulling himself forward with the other. His elbows dig into the dirt. Stones press into his ribs. Every 10 yards he stops and listens. Somewhere ahead, maybe 200 yards, German soldiers are dug in behind that tree line. If they hear movement, if they see shapes in the smoke, they will open fire blindly and hope they hit something. Eddie crawls beside him, breath coming in short bursts. The bandage on his hand is already soaked through with blood and dirt. Davis follows, eyes wide, scanning the smoke for shapes that do not belong. Kowalski moves like a snake, low and silent. Carson, the rifleman, brings up the rear with his M1 Garand cradled in his arms, safety off, finger near the trigger. It takes them 22 minutes to cover 700 yards when Jack finally lifts his head and sees the hull of the Sherman directly in front of him, close enough to touch. The relief lasts exactly 1 second before the fear comes back twice as strong. The tank sits in a shallow depression, turret fully exposed, scorch marks running down the right side where the fire burned. The 75mm gun barrel points at an odd angle, frozen mid-traverse. It looks exactly like what it is: a dead machine waiting to be claimed by whoever is brave enough or stupid enough to reach it first. Jack taps the hull twice with his knuckles. The sound is soft, but it carries. Inside, nothing moves. The crew is long gone. He pulls himself up onto the rear deck, muscles screaming, and cracks the engine compartment. The radial engine is cold but intact. No shrapnel damage, no leaks. The Germans hit the turret, not the power plant. This tank can move if they can make the turret work. He climbs to the commander's hatch and drops inside. The interior smells like burned rubber and electrical fire. Wires hang loose from the Traverse control panel. The motor housing is cracked and blackened. When Davis shines a hooded flashlight into the gap, they both see the problem. A single shell fragment sheared the main power cable. The motor itself is undamaged. The gears are fine. It is one cable and one junction box. Fixable, Davis whispers. Maybe 20 minutes if nothing goes wrong. Jack nods and looks at his watch. The smoke outside is already thinning. Gaps appear in the white curtain, opening corridors of clear air. In 10 minutes the field will be naked. If they are still here when that happens, the Germans will see them and the mission ends in a hail of machine gun fire. Davis starts working immediately, pulling the damaged cable free, stripping insulation with a knife, twisting copper strands back together. His hands move fast, but his face is pale. This is not a repair any manual would approve. It is a battlefield splice held together with electrical tape and desperation. But if it works for 60 seconds, that is enough time to traverse the turret, unlock the gun, and drive. Kowalski squeezes into the turret basket and feeds new wire through the narrow channels, his thin frame the only reason he fits. Jack keeps watch through the commander's periscope, scanning the tree line. The smoke is definitely failing now. Through one widening gap, he sees movement, a German soldier, rifle slung, walking slowly along the edge of the trees. The soldier stops, turns, looks directly at the tank. Jack freezes, his hand hovers over the periscope, ready to duck, but any movement might catch the soldier's eye. The German stands there for 5 seconds, 10, 15. Jack can see details now, the shape of the helmet, the way the rifle strap crosses the man's chest. Then slowly the German turns away and walks back into the trees. Either he did not see them, or he assumed the tank was still abandoned. Either way, they just bought another few minutes. Maybe. How long? Jack hisses into the turret. 30 seconds, Davis says, voice tight. The smoke is gone now, completely. The field lies open and exposed under the pale grey light of early dawn. Jack can see the American lines behind them. He can see the German tree line ahead. Anyone with binoculars can see the tank. If they look closely, they can see the open hatches, the figures moving inside. Done, Davis says. Jack drops into the commander's seat and flips the traverse switch. For one terrible frozen moment, nothing happens. Then the turret jerks and begins to rotate, left, right, slowly, but steadily. The motor whines, loud in the silence. The gun barrel swings through its arc. The sound carries across the field like a siren. Jack sees it happen in slow motion. A German soldier at the tree line, 200 yards away, turns his head sharply toward the tank. He raises his arm, points, shouts something. Other figures appear. One drops to a knee and raises a rifle. "Start the engine!" Jack screams. Eddie, already in the driver's seat, slams his hand down on the starter. The engine coughs once, twice, then catches with a roar that shatters the morning quiet. 30 tons of steel shake to life. Smoke pours from the exhaust. The whole tank vibrates. The German tree line erupts. 3 machine guns open fire simultaneously, tracers ripping across the field in bright arcing lines. Bullets hammer the hull with sharp metallic impacts. One round punches through a vision slit and screams past Jack's head, so close he feels the heat. "Go!" he roars. Eddie drops the transmission into gear, and the Sherman lunges forward, tracks biting into the mud. He does not try to be smooth. He just opens the throttle and aims the nose toward the American lines. The tank crashes through a hedge, bounces over a shell crater, and keeps moving. The entire vehicle shakes and bucks like a living thing trying to throw them off. A German anti-tank gun fires from the tree line. The first shot misses, throwing a geyser of dirt 30 yards to the left. The crew adjusts. The second shot hits the front glacis plate dead center with a sound like a church bell being struck by a sledgehammer. The entire tank rings. For one frozen instant, Jack does not know if the shell penetrated. Then he sees the gouge in the armor, a bright scar in the steel, and realizes it deflected. The armor held. Jack pulls himself up into the commander's hatch, grabs the 50 caliber machine gun, and swings it toward the muzzle flash in the trees. He does not have time to aim. He just holds the trigger and walks the fire across the tree line, suppressing, forcing the gun crew to duck. Brass casings pour out of the ejection port and bounce off the turret. The noise is deafening. His shoulders take the recoil in hard, rhythmic slams. Inside the hull, Kowalski and Davis brace themselves against the walls as the tank rocks and sways. Eddie fights the steering levers, muscles burning, trying to keep the 30-ton machine moving in a straight line while the ground tries to throw it sideways. He cannot see the whole field through the narrow vision slit. He navigates by instinct, by the angle of the slope, by the feel of the tracks under him. American machine guns open up from the friendly positions, firing over the Sherman's head, sending covering fire into the German tree line. Mortar rounds start dropping along the edge of the woods, white phosphorus bursting in burning clouds. The battalion has realized what is happening and is throwing everything they have to cover the tank's retreat. A second anti-tank round hits the right side of the hull and deflects off at an angle, tearing a chunk of metal loose but failing to penetrate. A third shot misses completely, passing so close that Jack sees the shell in flight, a dark blur against the grey sky. The Sherman roars across the last 100 yards at full speed, engine screaming, throwing mud from the tracks. It crashes through the final hedgerow and skids to a halt inside American lines, surrounded suddenly by foxholes and sandbagged positions. Eddie kills the engine. The silence that follows is so total, it feels like pressure in the ears. Jack climbs out of the hatch on legs that barely hold him. His hands are black with powder residue, his ears ring. Eddie crawls out of the driver's seat and collapses onto the ground, chest heaving, face white. Kowalski and Davis stumble out of the turret and sit down hard, too exhausted to speak. Carson, the rifleman, stands up slowly from where he was braced in the hull and just stares at the German tree line, breathing like he ran a mile. No one says anything for a long moment. They just sit there, alive, while the adrenaline drains out of their bodies and leaves them hollow and shaking. The battalion major appears, walking fast across the open ground from the command post. When he reaches the tank, he stops and just looks at it. 3 deep gouges in the armor where shells hit and failed to punch through. A shattered vision block, bullet scars across the turret, but the tank is here, it is back. He looks at Jack. Casualties? None, Jack says. His voice sounds distant in his own ears. We brought everyone back. The major's face does not change, but something shifts in his eyes. Relief, respect, maybe both. This tank goes to Bravo Company's 2nd platoon. They lost theirs 3 days ago. The crew has been sitting in reserve waiting for a replacement. He pauses. You just put 5 men back into armor. He nods once, sharp and formal, then turns and walks away. Eddie sits on the ground with his back against a tree, hands still trembling. He looks at Jack and shakes his head. 41 hours without sleep, 18 tanks, 1 suicide mission. Jack, if they ask us to do this again tomorrow, I am going to tell them to find someone else. Jack sits down beside him, too tired to argue. They will ask, and we will go. Because if we do not, someone else dies. Eddie stares at the ground for a long moment, then he nods. Yeah, I know. 3 hours later, Jack finally sleeps. When he wakes, 6 hours after that, the sound of engines fills the air. The battalion is moving forward again, and in the column, mixed with tanks that never broke, are the ones his platoon brought back, machines that should be scrap metal, held together with improvised parts, and the refusal of tired men to accept that dead means gone forever. By the end of the Normandy campaign, repair units across the American divisions will return more than 60% of damaged tanks to service. The Germans, starved of fuel and spare parts, will abandon theirs where they fall. That difference, that quiet logistics war fought by men with wrenches instead of rifles, will be one of the invisible reasons the Allies win. Jack Miller will survive the war. He will go home to Detroit, return to the factory floor, and spend the rest of his life installing gearboxes into cars that will never see combat. He will not talk much about what he did in France. When his grandchildren ask decades later, he will tell them he fixed tanks. He will not mention the night he crawled 700 yards into no man's land, repaired a machine under enemy observation, and drove it back through a storm of fire. But the men who fought beside those tanks will remember, and that in the end is the only recognition that ever mattered.